Back too far. Good evening, everybody. This is March 13th, 2024. It is 4:02. This is the Finance Committee meeting. I'm calling this meeting to order. This meeting will be video recorded and broadcast over local access channel 8 and through the town website at www.eastham-ma.gov. And I'm going to go, I had hoped that Adam would be here today on item number 4. But I think I'd like to go to item number 4 first, even though he's not here, to talk about the police department staffing proposal. So
Mary, I think it's at your discretion, but as part of the update on the budget, I've incorporated discussing that. So I prefer to do it all kind of together, if you don't mind.
Okay.
So if you kind of go through the agenda way it's on, that would be helpful to me.
Okay, so we'll say we're starting with item number 3, but it incorporates item number 4.
So 3 is the school district
Yes,
update?
yeah.
Okay, great. So now, and Roy and Paul, if you haven't, I did send out 2 pieces of information on email earlier this afternoon about 1 o'clock. And that's what I'm going to reference. So if you haven't checked your email, if you can, you'll see these documents.
Right. I've got it, Rich. Thanks.
Right.
Yeah, I've got it.
Otherwise, I'm going to pass them out. And
I need whatever.
Yeah.
there's 2 pieces. I'm talking about the first page first. That's just one whole package, Peter. Package. Yeah. Mira, if you could, let's down to those 3. Oops. So it's been a bit of a scramble. We got all the school information, and with all that school information, that involved lots of considerations that I had to trace through lots of different ways with different folks and different peoples. And then I had to make it all fit into a budget plan, which is the segue into, the next part of the agenda, which also relates to the police. So it all kind of fits together. But the end of the day, the bottom line is the school budgets in total, Cape Cod Tech, Nauset Regional School District assessments, and Eastham Elementary School came in about 1.24 million more than what we have provided for, which is obviously a substantial amount. But I thought what was important to look at and to understand is, why did it go up so much? If you recall, in our budget planning process, when I presented a draft budget back in January, we set aside and provided a 3% increase for the district, and I think a small amount for some special education money. So when I say 1.24 more, it's 1.24 more than the 3%. You recall, we had a balanced budget with the 3+%. And so now, we were pretty tight at that point. And we've had some changes that I've incorporated for state aid and state assessments and a couple other assessments that we've tweaked. But we certainly can't handle 1.24 million. And so when we get to talk about the budget, we do have proposed an override of 1.2 million for the town-wide budget, which is entirely attributed to the school district assessments. But I want you to understand why it went up that amount of money. And that's what this first page represents. It's a page that says explanation of proposed budget increases versus plan for the educational services budget. And our school, other than the elementary school, but the tech and the Nauset district, break down their assessments between an operating assessment and a debt assessment. And I break them out separately because all of our debt is considered excluded debt. And so to the extent they have debt from the districts, it gets added on top of our tax levy. And then I've got a column here for the total assessment. But I'm really just going to focus on that first column, which is the operating assessment. And on the top here, where it's the pink section where it says school budgets, you see Nauset, we provided on the operating piece 5.48 million. It came in at 6.1 million, which is 636,000 more than planned. Tech 458 came in at 563, it's 104,000 more than planned. And the elementary school 490,000 more than planned, for a total of 1.23. So why? And I'm going to first go, well, no, let's go sequentially here. First number listed down below in this blue section is the town of Eastham's participation in its school district increased. Nauset, we were 8.7% prior year. And this year, we're 20.3% of the district, meaning even if the school budget had not increased a dime, our assessment will go up 474,000 because our participation has increased.
Enrollment increased.
Percentage.
Did our enrollment, is that driven by our enrollment increasing or enrollment decreasing from other towns?
Yes, both.
Both.
Cape Cod Tech, same situation from 3.3 to 4.3, basically, which shifts 116,000 from, all things being equal, would have shifted 116,000 from other communities and into Eastham for 116.
And the debt number goes up by the
That's-
same percentage.
But that's why I have it as a separate column.
Right, but
So this is just operating dollars, not debt dollars
for now,
for now.
But-
Yeah.
but the 1.2 million that it's up includes.
Well, I'll show that in a second. There's also a proposal out there to change the methodology of apportioning cost from the school committee. There's always been two methods, the regional school agreement method, which has been a per pupil formula, and what's called the foundation formula or statutory method, which is actually this default method prescribed by state law. But for the entire history of the district, all the towns have participated in, as either a part of the motion or as a separate article at town meeting to allocate school costs per the agreement, not per the state formula. We have some issues with that for a number of reasons, and we don't need to get into them tonight. Other than to say, I think there's some consensus amongst at least a couple or maybe three of the towns that we shouldn't be making this change this year. So perhaps this 51,000 will go away. But for budgeting purposes, I'm budgeting our worst case in case, it doesn't get all pulled together. It doesn't change the math too drastically one way or the other. It's 51,000, but
Just quickly, would you say there's still conversation going on between the towns regarding the methodology?
Yeah.
What's the timing on that? Because we're getting close to the bitter end.
it's not that hard, the timing wise, because it just has to get a consensus that we're all going to agree that regardless of what the school committee sends to us, we reserve the right to vote the way we want to vote it. So I'm going to advocate to all the other town managers to include the same article that we've included for the past, 40 years.
So you're talking about a warrant article regarding the methodology to be used.
The same article that's been there forever.
And I just want to make sure that I understand. You're because you're talking about the alternative versus the statutory.
And what we've been voted all these years is the alternative. When
Yeah,
you say
yeah.
alternative, it's what the regional school agreement says we're going to do. But in any event, that's a piece of why we're at 1.23 million. I'm going to skip the middle there for a second, go down to Eastham Elementary School SPED, special education costs increased substantially from the prior year, almost $400,000. So all those things I just went over really are largely out of our control. We have to do those things. What is within our control is what's in the middle here. So, 1.23 million sounds like a huge budget increase, and it is. But of that whole amount, less than 200,000 is attributed to operating budgets in excess of the 3% that we've provided for. So it brings basically to Eastham, basically that turns into, we provided 3% and it came in at, a little over 4.5. Which is what most towns are coming in at. So not too dissimilar from what the town budgets are coming in. So the final section here, the funding increases from planning amounts. Our operating budget can absorb 31,000 within the municipal budget. And we'd be looking for a $1.2 million override for schools. And I'll leave the operating there for a second and just go over to the debt assessment column.
Can I just ask a question first?
Sure.
On the 31,372, where is that coming from?
Just excess levy capacity we have with all the final adjustments I've been able to make with state aid and stuff like that.
Okay,
It's not coming out of anybody's budget.
Okay.
And that's what we'll talk about in a second, the budget. So
Thank
on
you.
the debt, as Peter indicated, because of our participation increases, the debt assessed to us is also increasing. I have to tell you that I have a mistake here in this debt column, and maybe nobody would ever pick it up, but when we're done after tonight, I'll resend out a revised version that adds across properly and down properly, because things are supposed to tie out, and you might not appreciate it, but I'm an accountant and things like that bother me. So, but the increase in our debt service because of the increase in the participation means that we paid 132,000 more on the Nauset debt than we would have if we were, last year, and 52.5 on the tech debt. That's not a budget impactful thing in the sense of it doesn't affect our tax levy because it's exempt debt and we get to add it to our tax levy. But obviously it adds to our tax levy, which raises the tax burden to our residents.
What's the mistake? The 132? If something doesn't tie.
Well, the 181 is supposed to jive with the 129 up above. And that's because the 52.
Oh, you forgot to subtract the 3?
And I forgot to subtract it. So I got a couple of mistakes in here. Doesn't change the key takeaway here is our debt's up 185 grand because of the
3,000 isn't going to help us much.
Right.
So I guess I'll just leave it there at the moment.
Rich, can you hear me? This is Jerry Searcell.
Yep.
Is there, I apologize for not being there, but having to drive in Boston rush both ways, I just got home and resting. Do we have a detailed budget from the school that shows, this is my bugaboo, shows how much money we're putting into the middle school building and updates and repairs and how much we pay for custodial and landscape? I mean, because I don't have that, so I don't know if you have that or.
Well, they have various line items in the operating budgets that would have custodians and basic landscaping. So if that's a question you want, I could ask them to pull that, pull it out of their various line items to give you that answer. And then in addition to that, which would be in the operating budget, there is also a capital assessment that's part of the school district's budget of $602,000. So we could ask them to explain that a little bit because they don't. I know the detail because I'm involved, but on the surface of the budget documents you have, I don't think they provide much detail on the 602. So I can let them know that it would be a question for them to address next Wednesday.
Right. And just for the finance committee to look at, to know where I'm coming from. We have $170 million brand new school opening up school year 25-26. And I've seen no discussion anywhere of what we're going to do once that new building opens, because it holds 900 students. And I think that there needs to be a discussion, not just within the school committee, but for all 4 towns. And one of the questions is, how much are we throwing in to a very, very old middle school that has weak plumbing and according to the chairman of the school committee, and also a very worrisome septic system. So I just want to have them show how much we're putting into this old building when we compare to basically a brand new building opening up fully in 25-26. So I want to try and make a push, and that will be next Wednesday. Hopefully I don't have to go to Boston again, but next Wednesday to try and get some information on that, on how much it's costing us in just keeping up the building of the middle school and the old Orleans High School, which is our middle school. And so that's why I asked those questions, Rich. So anything that can really break out the middle school costs, I think would be important for any discussion looking at what do we do in 25, 26. Thank you for letting me say my piece, Mary.
Oh, you're welcome.
So that's the school update. You have the detail, but I don't really want to get, I'll leave that to the schools to get into the detail and, address Jerry's questions. But if there are any questions, you can tell me now or send me an email and I will forward them to the district and see if they can address them as part of their presentation.
I'm probably reading this wrong, obviously, but when we look at your numbers down below, right, on the explanation of the changes, right? So you're telling me a 1.5% increase in our attendance in enrollment translated into a $474,000 increase. So that 1.5%, that's the total value, right? That is that just the 1.5%, the 474,000? Because I'm looking at that 474,000 on 5.4 million. No,
No.
well, I'm looking at it, the 20%.
No,
Help me correlate the numbers.
the 1.5% is on the total budget, which is,
5.4, right? 5.5.
no, that's just Eastham's assessment.
Okay, then that's where I'm wrong.
It's,
Okay.
I forget what the total budget is, but probably on
So
15
36
million or
million or
something.
whatever it was,
Yeah.
okay. All right,
Yeah, that's where they're 47.
47
Yeah.
million, okay.
47.
So that makes sense to me, because I
So you
kept.
take the total budget at 18.7% of the total budget. And then if that total budget is now 20.3,
Mhm.
the result is
It
the
results in the 474.
No, I got it, but that 47 is not here. I'm just trying to use it compared to the numbers on here. It's
trying to keep
everyone
the
could
pages
use-
simple.
I understand, we want everybody to have the work from the same numbers.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I just want to add that Jerry's comments about the capital plan, and are we, when will that be discussed? Is that going to, the capital plan be discussed at next week's meeting, or what,
The towns or the schools?
the schools, the capital
That's
plan?
part of their budget, but yeah.
Yeah. That'll be on, because I'm all confused as to the dates that I keep seeing different dates for different meetings, and it's a little confusing to me. So,
Well, in their budget presentation and the assessment that they send to us includes a piece for a capital assessment, so.
so are we supposed to be having a joint meeting on schools next week?
It's a finance committee next Wednesday and we've invited the select board to attend.
So, okay, that's the 20th. That's going to be the select joint meeting.
It's not a joint meeting, it's a finance committee,
Okay,
but select board members will likely attend.
oh, okay, and that's just going to be on education.
Just the 3 schools will be there to talk about their budgets.
Oh, and they are actually coming. Okay.
Yeah, I got
It's
them all
been
lined up.
confusing to me exactly when things are happening, because the select board keeps changing their dates. So that's my concern, because then there was another one on March 25th with the select board at 4:30. So I was wondering what that's supposed to be. Yeah, that's their next meeting. Select board is scheduled for the next meeting at
Yes, that's their regular scheduled meeting.
4:30 on the March.
So that's
25th.
the budget hearing, town budget hearing.
So that's the town budget hearing,
Hearing.
Yes.
March.
At 4:30, but the actual budget discussion will start at 5:30.
Oh, so the 4:30 is the budget that, I'm sorry, but say that again.
The actual budget discussion will begin at 5:30.
Okay, and what is the 4:30?
At 4:30, they'll be discussing other issues
Oh,
that are not budget related.
okay, so the select board is meeting on the 25th, and they're going to start the meeting at 4:30 to 5:30 for the regular type of agenda, and then at 5:30, there's going to be a public hearing on the budget.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
So just to get this straight again, just to follow up on Tom's. The 1.5% increase in our participation is really an 8% increase in our piece. 8% increase is 1.5%. So the 3.5% increase that was in the plan, it's another 8%.
Yeah, I'm not sure of your math there, but I'm sure you're right, Rick, because you usually are. But yes,
Yeah, just huge.
just look, I guess the way I look at it, all things being equal, we would have been short $191,000.
Yeah.
And we probably could have figured that out.
So then the impact on the ultimate tax rate for our taxpayers is the 1,413,000 less the 31,000 you found in the budget.
Pretty much.
Well, that doesn't add up to 1.2.
No, because, well, yeah, that's the override piece.
The 1.2 is on the operating. He's adding the debt as well.
Oh,
I'm adding
oh,
the
oh,
debt
oh,
'cause
I'm
we
sorry, I'm sorry.
Pay the debt.
Okay.
You have to pay the debt though too, so that's, you found that out of the existing budget that you have in order to cover the increase there.
No, the debt is exempt debt, which means you calculate your maximum tax levy you're allowed to raise, which we do.
Mhm.
And then you add any exempt debt to it. So this extra 182,000 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Gets added to the tax levy.
Yeah, so that's my point. So.
So I didn't find it. We just added more taxes.
Okay.
'Cause we're allowed to.
Increase the tax rate. So
You
that
don't
goes
have
back
to,
what
you don't
I-
have to override it. It just happens.
That's.
Right.
Well, was
An
o-
increase. I don't go for an override. It's just I've already got the authority to do it. I'm gonna do it.
Well, it was overridden. It is an override and it was voted at the time the debt was authorized. It's a ballot vote. So it is an override. It just,
That's
you took it a couple of years ago.
Right.
And now you gotta,
We
Pay
just, we just,
based on one plan.
we just thought, when we approved that override, we thought it was $182,000 less.
Right.
Because we didn't plan on participating more.
now, the interesting thing, and this, I don't want to get too far afield, and we have a whole nother year now to discuss the opening up of the regional agreement and how that might play out and be resolved. But regardless of that, it brings up a whole bunch of issues. But last year we were 18.7, now we're 20.3. Maybe we'll be more in the future, but we could also be less. So in my mind, if it's more, we'll have to figure out the more. But if it's less, what do we do with that? So I need to be on top of the schools to make sure that if it's less, that's not absorbed, A, on their end, and B, being as transparent and forthright as I am with the town. For sake of argument, say next year, all things are equal, but we have a little bit less participation, so we have an extra $100,000, for sake of argument. I'm also not going to use and absorb that $100,000 into our budget. So we'll have an extra 100,000. So what do we do with that? And, my wheels are spinning is, A, you could just return it to the taxpayer, which is a legit, obviously a good thing to do. Or you could steward it and put it in a special education stabilization fund or some sort of education stabilization fund. So if you have these types of issues in the future, you can smooth them out.
Rich, let me ask you a question. This is based on every year the enrollment changes, what I mean,
Yes.
on everybody. If we go to the 3-year rolling, right? It
It's-
should have, it's not gonna make it go away, but it should have more of a leveling effect on this in the
Yes.
planning, true?
So Rich, you're saying that we were of the,
Use your,
Yeah.
make sure you use it.
uh,
Pull it closer.
you were saying that last year we were only 18 point some percent of the schools. Well, that is far below what it has been running. We've been running at a percent of about 21% until I guess last year. And I guess I did not recognize that.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that, Russ. I can go back and I can actually get those numbers and let y'all know. But my recollection is we're probably closer to that 18.5 to a nice 18.5, 19.5% range, plus or minus each year.
Those are not the numbers I remember.
All right, well, I'll get them.
It's middle school and high school though, right?
Yeah.
So would that make a difference, Russ, in what you're thinking? It's the middle school and the high school.
No,
No?
it's both.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I didn't know if you were
No,
thinking one.
I'm thinking of what we were between the four towns. The total between the four towns.
Yep.
We were spending 21, just about 21% for almost every year. It was very stable. Very rarely did it move. And that number of our percentage is extremely out of what I was aware of.
Did we take a big jump during COVID though?
Nah, it'd be speculation on my part. I'll have to just get the numbers and show them to you. Let you
Okay,
know.
I was on the impression we took a big jump during COVID.
I mean, as far as enrollment was
Yeah,
concerned?
People who came back up here stayed full time.
Hmm.
That was the impression I was being given by some
I
teachers.
think
But it's
some,
probably happening in all the towns.
Yeah,
all the
yeah,
district towns.
yeah.
They came-
It
oh,
might
I
not have
say,
affected our-
love-
we weren't the only
We went
town
up and
that
so did Orleans.
that
and
would
Rockland.
have,
Okay,
would
that's
would
right.
have received or ended up with additional students.
Good point.
Rich, if enrollment changes between now and next October, next September, does that change anything what we're doing here? Or
No, the budgets and assessments are based on October 1 enrollments. Prior year, October 1.
So going back to what you were talking about just previously, wouldn't you have the numbers before the budget got finalized about what our percentage is? So you don't have to worry about if our percentage goes back down, what to do with that extra, and you'll know.
Yeah, I mean, I know, and I knew this fall that we were
I
up,
don't know what the.
but I don't know what the
is.
budget's gonna be, and I,
Percentage
you know,
doesn't help you, yeah, okay,
Well, it helps, but it doesn't.
it doesn't.
I mean, you can assume everything being equal, you know, but you know, you could also hope for a miracle and that state aid increases or minimum pupil aid increases, and you know, so you might have had an increase. So you just don't know. That's why this is a moving target, and it's not final until it's final with the schools.
So I hope's not a plan.
Well, and the state is having its own issues with revenue these days, so I'm not sure that that's going to help us any.
Want me to roll into what this means for the budget now?
Yeah, go for it.
Can always come back if you have any questions. So now I'm looking at the second page of the handout. It looks like
Are we
this.
still just talking about the 1.2?
No, now
Oh, okay.
the second page represents what the budget proposal looks like that we'll discuss at our upcoming budget hearing. So on this page, I want to talk about scenarios and how we have to approach this. The fact that we've got a potential override, and I'm now also going to add in, do we want to do something about
Please.
police chief's requests?
Mhm.
So as it stands, as presented, and all the budgets that you've seen all the budgets at this point, with the new amounts for the school, the total budget appropriations for the operating budget are 44,356,000. It's that top line there. We think we had instructions that went out asking people have level service budgets. And by and large, we did. We had a couple of instances that exceeded. And so that will be taken into account as we move forward, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But just on the surface, I just keep this simple and say, you know, absent this situation with the schools, we have been able to accommodate all these requests. Now, we might quibble about the overall level of tax levy, which I understand, but our tax levy accommodates the request without an override. And we thought everything that was proposed had merit. And so for sake of argument, at this point, let's go with that as our starting point. This is the 44,356,000. Our property tax limit without an override is 37,330. Then you see the $1.2 million override for a total tax levy of 38,530,000. But there's other elements that fund the budget. Right now in our initial budget proposal, we have 815,000 of short-term rental receipts funding our wastewater debt
Mhm.
and 345,000 funding the town center plaza debt. For a total of 1,160,000. To the extent we get more than that, just getting off a little of a tangent here, that would become free cash next year. And if we continued to follow our practice, that excess free cash attributed to short-term rental receipts would be put into the wastewater stabilization fund. Also, we have other funding sources, and I just aggregated them all because they're irrelevant to this discussion, but those total 4,600,000. And so we have 44.3 of appropriations and 44.3 of funding under this first column, budget proposal with override. Then I'm going to stop there for a second and now go to the other column. That relies on an override. And in lots of towns, they don't have some of the alternatives that we have. You are required to have a contingent budget. Because what if the override doesn't pass? So I'm not going to use these, I'll use rounded numbers. You appropriate $10 million contingent on $1 million override, and you'll know at that meeting whether that passes, but you won't know for a week or two because you have a ballot vote, whether it'll pass at the ballot. If it doesn't pass at the ballot, your town meeting authorized $10 million of appropriations, but you don't have $10 million of revenue. And so if it fails at the ballot, then you're required in that circumstance to have another town meeting and to revise your budget to $9 million. So to avoid that situation, what you do is you vote a contingent budget at the same town meeting. So that's what we would do here. Theoretically, you could say we want the town meeting to raise and appropriate 44,356,000 contingent upon the passage of an override. And if the override doesn't pass, they authorize a contingent budget of 43.1. Right?
I thought it was 44.2.
The second. column.
I'm not on the second column yet.
Oh,
Oh.
I'm just, if we did a contingent budget for the full 1.2,
okay.
right, you'd have to have two budgets. If you had no other revenue, you'd have to have two appropriation budgets, ones that provides for the override and one if the override doesn't pass. Which would mean we'd have to cut our budget to 43.1. And $1.2 million of reductions to the municipal budget, not schools, because we can't change the schools. So it's just out of the town side of the budget, would be extremely devastating to the services that we offer. So, if we need to do that, of course we would do that. But so we have options though. And this is part of the budget hearing for you and this public and the select board to contemplate. But the option, the less impactful option, is because we do have short-term rental receipts that largely are unbudgeted, except for debt. And our wastewater debt is exempt debt, meaning we didn't have to use short-term rental receipts. We could have simply added it to our tax levy and left that 815,000 of short-term rental receipts untapped.
But didn't we pass a warrant article saying that we were going to use the short-term rental for wastewater?
Just been a policy.
It's just a policy.
I'm sorry?
It's just a policy.
Policy? Okay.
So instead of having a contingent budget that cuts $1.2 million out of the municipal side budget, we substitute 1,055,000 of short-term rental receipts. We no longer could use the 815 to pay for the wastewater debt that gets added to the tax levy because it's exempt. 345,000 still used for town center plaza. And there would be appropriation reductions of 145,000. So appropriation reductions of 145,000 and adding 1,055,000 of short-term rental receipts is the $1.2 million. And the total use of our short-term rental receipts would be the 345 Town Center Plaza debt and $1,055,000 for the operating budget for a total of $1.4 million.
So is the 145 reduction in the appropriations themselves, is that about what the real increase in services were that were put in?
No, unless I'm hearing you wrong, Rick. No, the 145 represents the different, I would not want to commit more than $1.4 million of short-term rental receipts to the budget. That would,
Mm.
so it's what's left after taking $1,055,000.
It's not a buildup of the extra library day and the other
No.
things we added.
But I certainly know what all those things are.
Yeah.
And those probably we would be among the first items that would come out of that 145.
How does this affect the entire wastewater project?
And that's the issue. Now this alternative budget commits our short-term rental receipts to the operating budget, and that's a one-time decision. And to get out of that, again, would basically require now, instead of a school override, a town override. And we're in my mind, it sucks having to ask for an override, I get it, but what's causing it this year is the schools, and in my mind, we ought to go on the premise of we need this money because of the schools, which I indicated here.
But if our percentage went back down next year and it flipped the other way, then we wouldn't need to use the STR for the operating budget.
Right, things could change and our obligation to the school would be less, and then we'd hit, all things being equal, we have excess levy capacity, which if we had, would just basically a way of it going back to the taxpayers, or we could utilize it to build a stabilization fund so we don't have this on a year-in-year basis.
But at the end of the day, the contingent budget with this plan, the impact on the taxpayer would be virtually the same
Pretty close.
as passing the over.
That's so good segue into this second little section here. So property tax impact on the median valued home with the override is $7.59. Without the override is $7.51, 8-cent difference. So burden goes from $5,668 to $5,612, a $56 savings. And in the worst case scenario, the median taxpayer's bill is going up $727. And we haven't talked about the police yet, which I know we're all chomping at the bit. Let me just get into the police real quick though, because this is an important part of the plan. Because we could find ways to cut and make it perhaps a less of an override. I'm philosophically a little bit opposed to it. I'm not opposed to cutting budgets and reducing things, but we are where we are because we've made certain decisions over the years and got funding from town meeting to support those decisions. And to give them away without appropriate level of thought process to it, just doesn't seem right to me, especially when it's the schools driving this issue. That being said, we had an initial proposal from Chief Bohannon to add 4 police officers for $650,000. In talking with Jackie, we recognize a total of $1,850,000 of override questions is probably not palatable and probably endangers everything. So we pared back the police proposal. I've spoken with Adam and he's supportive to 2 police officers at $300,000. To the extent that's short, to the extent there are extras in the budget that we might otherwise cut, and for sake of argument, just call it $145,000 since that's the contingent. Let's steward those and reprioritize our budgets going forward. And I don't mean necessarily we're even waiting to 2026 during the fiscal year so that Adam can get 2 police officers close to the beginning of the fiscal year, which he'll have to onboard and do some training and stuff with, then gives us 4 to 6, 7 months to see, can we reprioritize our existing budget to come up with an additional 250, 300 to fund the additional 2 officers. So part of the proposal of the budget with the override is a commitment from town administration to get the other 2 officers without having to go for a further override. So originally we asked for 650 for 4, which is the full boat cost of bringing them on. We can do 2 for 300 and then rework our budget and hopefully not have to come back for any more money on an override for the other 2 to get us up to the full.
So you're hoping that somehow or other we'll figure out a way to get 300,000 for the other additional 2 officers
Yes.
next
I
fiscal year.
don't say we're gonna get an extra 300,000,
No,
but we
I'm
will
just-
reprioritize within our budgets
Mhm.
how we're using it, which would necessitate, for example, some of these departments ask for a little bit more than a level service budget. They might get it in this passed at town meeting, but we might have to institute a hold on that spending on that until we go through this exercise.
How does Adam feel about this or have about the 2 versus the 4 right now?
He's supportive.
But
He
what-
thinks it
but-
might be good in a sense, we've talked a little bit this morning and onboarding 4 is a chore. It can be, he can do it, it can be done. But are there 4 available? And are you rushing to fill 4 spots? Or he thinks it's an opportunity. Let's get 2 really good ones and then we can take the time to find 2 more really good ones instead of trying to find 4 and perhaps settling. Right.
More sense.
But if you're successful, he'll hire 4 officers in the next year.
Exactly. If we have the budget, if we have the budget.
If you
flexibility.
find the
If
300.
if we can find the 300 next fiscal year.
What about the first 300? Is that gonna be a separate override?
Yes.
Yeah, so well, that would be
So
1.5.
2 overrides, a
Oh,
total of 1.5
1.5
million.
The 1 for 3 totaling.
And then, I'm just gonna say, it. Are we then next year with the additional 2 cops? That if we hire 4 cops, are we gonna need an override?
Yeah.
No,
following
that's
year?
that's part of the plan.
Okay, so you reduce
So
the
the-
operating budget.
The plan is if the budget with the 1.2 for the school passes.
Yeah.
We are going to we will probably reprioritize some of the money within that budget
Right,
to accommodate hiring the additional 2.
I got that.
So no additional override required in the future
Okay, so.
for the
you-
4 police
You
officers.
essentially reset the budgets, your operational budgets to not using the right word, but reallocate the $300,000 within the approved funds.
Yes,
And you said the magic word, so you're not setting yourself up for another override for FY 26 based on the police officers. Okay,
Hopefully.
hopefully. Then the second question I have is, what indication have we given the taxpayers or, that relative to the STRs used for wastewater, because is the expectation of the town right now that 1.2 is gonna be there for debt? And now I know you can move, if we move it around like you're proposing here, because it's exempt debt, you can just increase your tax rate, right? So how's that gonna be perceived?
probably not good.
No.
How does the community at large understand that we've been stewarding short-term rental receipts to pay for future wastewater? Probably not, because how much do people pay that close attention? But to the extent people do pay attention, there are some astute people. They know that we had an article for, what was it, $1.2 million last year to a wastewater stabilization fund that was funded. We'll have another one this year with the unspent wastewater proceeds from the prior year.
That's the one that I was referring to when I asked about it.
And it was a select board policy for, I think, 3 years now
Mhm.
to not use wastewater, short-term rental receipts for the budget because we're saving it for wastewater debt. So how much does the community know that? I don't know, but
But it has
that's
been
why,
involved.
that's why you guys are in the details and the select board's in the details.
Yeah.
You're kind of the go-between on that.
Why wouldn't we go to a true flat services budget? Rather than have that as the plug.
Rick, remember your.
Yeah, well, why wouldn't we go to a true flat services budget? Rather than, cause I'm guessing at the end of the day, if all this worked out like this, we would not be at a true flat services budget.
When you say flat services, you mean
I'm not
I
sure. what you
mean,
No.
truly cranked down
the extras above a
the
level service?
extras everywhere.
Yeah.
To get as much as we possibly could to a true flat
So in that scenario, Rick, I know what you're saying, but I just want to make sure I get a level or flat service, to the penny, so to speak. Are you allowing for, to the extent we've had any provision for things in prior budgets? So just for sake of argument, and that isn't necessarily true, but let's say in the police department budget, we calculate all the salaries and come up to 100% of what those salaries are, and then we provide for $10,000 just in case. And so if you did a level service budget the next year, it'd be 100% of the cost of salaries plus 10,000 again. That would be a level service, right?
Right.
But are you saying you want that, but we're also going to take out the 10,000?
I don't think we can because we use the 10 and the others to fund capital, right?
Right.
So
So,
we can't.
all right. So in that scenario, the big things that you all saw were the library, 20,000 extra staffing, temporary, part-time staffing. And I think it was 18 or 20,000, somewhere around that area for extra materials. And then the COA had extra programming costs and newsletter costs.
Oh, and wasn't a big part of that, the increase in the tech contracts is a huge, I mean, there's something that's going up and we can't take that back down unless
Oh, that's what
we.
he's talking about, level service, right?
Right.
So the
Right.
things that are obvious, which I think some of you brought up at the time, were the library and the COA. So those would be the two, and that's an order of magnitude of, maybe 50 grand, 40 to 50 grand. Everything else is pretty much level service. Could we tighten that up? We could tighten that up. Basically, my easy math, and I'm not saying this is what we do, but if somebody pressed me to say right now, what would we do to come up with 145,000 on the contingent budget? It's probably those extras in the COA and the library of about 45. And the easy thing to do is cut 100,000 out of the reserve fund, and you would go from 200 to 100, and there's your 145. And so on the back of this page, you might not even know there's a back of this page.
Here, read the back.
The fine print.
It talks about these things. Talks about the 1.2, the need for the override on A, and B talks about the need for a contingency budget. Using short-term rental receipts. But, and this is where it gets into, we had a policy of saving that for debt service, which would probably cover about 30% of the debt service that we will be bringing on board for wastewater. And it would shift and really kind of gut our budget. And so that I think it's the fourth paragraph down. I talk about what you just referenced, Rick. We rely on about $1 million of free cash for our capital plan. Our expenditure budgets, I went back and looked over the last 3 years. We average about $1 million a return from our appropriation budgets that becomes free cash. That's 3.5%. So it's not a huge amount that's excess. Of that $1 million, about a third of that is salaries, which you can't bank on. But the reason it's salaries is you might have unspent overtime and you have unfilled positions all the time because people leave and you can't fill them, immediately. So basically what we're saying is you got about 660,000 of savings from expense line items, which is where we'd be cutting first. So for every dollar you take out of a budget reduction, all things being equal, you're reducing that 660 to something less. And that is impactful to our free cash. And I know people don't like me saying it, but it is true. When you rely on free cash, you need to have appropriate budgets to generate free cash. The alternative is to not have the free cash, and now we're going to do more borrowing for the capital. And then item C is where I talked about if we had the budget as proposed, we think there is some, to Rick's and others' point, some flexibility within our budget that would take us some time to work out, but we think we could get the extra 2 officers within that, not going back to a $350,000 or additional override in the future.
Do you think that will then impact what could have been your free cash without impacting your free cash? That's a question I want to ask you.
might be impactful to free cash,
Okay.
likely would be impactful to free.
What would happen if we didn't spend to the capital plan? Not in general sense, you know what I mean? How much did we spend in capital, this year for capital projects?
I think we're up over 1.5, 1.6 maybe.
1.6, 1.5, 1.6.
Over, I wouldn't say all, but the biggest sinkhole in our capital plan right now is facilities. And we got some issues. And, one of the biggest issues is in this campus here with our 3 buildings and HVAC and mechanical problems.
Mhm.
And so I just actually had a meeting Monday or Friday, and the guy came out on Monday. Engineering firm on engineering these HVAC systems. And they require lots of work.
Yeah.
Hundreds of thousands of dollars of work. Luckily, actually this week, we are starting and hopefully wrapping up our what's called our designation projects for our Green Communities grant. Once those are done, I can hopefully get funding from Green Communities and a competitive grant process to get some of these HVAC projects done without having to go to free cash or borrow. But that hasn't happened to the fall, and in between now and the fall, we've got summer. So I'm hoping I can take care of the easiest lift might be taking care of the fire department, for example, getting their situation sorted. They resorted to have to buy window units last year. So if I get them sorted, then maybe we can take their window units to put at town hall to get us through the summer. Because as part of this renovation, they cut all the condensers off and took them off.
Mhm.
Now the plan is to put them back, but there's a concern that they're not going to work
Gonna go back.
because they should have been replaced 8 years ago. So to your point is we have a lot of deferred maintenance and we've made a lot of ground over the last couple of years. I've made it a concerted effort since I've been here to address the capital needs,
Right.
but we haven't addressed some of the big ones yet.
See, that's it. That's kind of where I was going, obviously, over the long term, you pay for not addressing your capital, just like some of the problems that you're seeing right now. But I was wondering, if you're having these problems now with the facilities, it's coming at the expense, these surprises are coming at the expense of what the plan said, right? So there are already things we're putting off, I'm assuming, because unless you're finding the cash from someplace else, you've got to pay what your what
Yeah, and
your
that was the whole
priorities are,
reason
right?
another thing I have to follow up in the next, where are we now? March, another month or so, is we've been getting a townwide facilities assessment done. And so that'll be wrapping up soon. And that's really going to inform the process for the next year's capital plan.
I thought the feasibility,
Mary, Paul's got a question.
Paul?
I do. Thank you, Mary. Rich, I thank you and Jackie for thinking about voters seeing 1.2 for schools and 600,000 for cops and saying, let's make it 300,000 for cops. I'm just wondering if I see that as a voter and I don't have the backstory that it was going to be double that, I might say, 1.2 for school, 300,000 for cops. I know, let's put off the cops, and then it's only 1.2. Is that, how likely is that to happen?
I don't know, and that's why,
That's reality.
you guys get paid the big bucks. So what are you saying, Paul? We should go for the 650 and then on town meeting floor, adjust it down to 300 so people see it? Yeah.
It might not be a bad idea, or you can do, I'll give you any scenario you want. You ask for the 600,000 and Adam stands up there and explains why it's necessary. Adam stands up and asks for 6 and says, I can live with 3, or we don't involve Adam at all and say that the 2 cops are going to cost 300,000, but we're anticipating adding 2 more. I don't know.
Well, one of the things I appreciate is the wisdom of people on this board and on the select board. I mean, you're the pulse of the community. You know how it needs to go. My default is to, if we properly justified and defended why we need what we've got, is to keep what we've got because we said we needed it and we really need it. That being said, if I think we can accommodate other things, I would prefer to go to town meeting and not play the game of, hey, we're asking for 650, but it'll be 3 would be okay.
Yeah.
Then I just feel like that you know, some people might say, oh, that's great, but other people will say, well, this guy's he's a little disingenuous then.
I should have gone to 150 because he was happy at 3, so.
Right, so
That's what I would.
So from my perspective,
Hmm.
when Jackie and I talk about this, it's full transparency of what we think can happen. Now, based on this board and the select board's wisdom, if that's not the case, then we'll change it. But and you know, I rely on Jackie from the community perspective. You know, her initial input is let's get 650 and 1.2 for $1.8 million, and then let's figure out a way to cut $400,000 or $500,000. I'm like, well, you're just saying that the money that we told everybody we needed a year or two ago, we didn't need, which
Right.
isn't the case. And you're also saying you're cutting these other departments at the expense of the police, you know, which is not,
Right.
so we ultimately came to let's get a pared down police department proposal. And if we have the budget flexibility we have, it might come at the expense of some future free cash. But we get to where we need to go.
Yeah, I think Paul's got, it's an interesting scenario, Paul, that you put together, but I think there's 2 numbers that if you put out there in the police department that I think the citizens will respect is one, we haven't increased the number of staff on the police department since 1997, I think, if I got the right number.
Hmm.
Right.
And,
Quite a while.
and the population in the town has increased,
Yeah.
from, I forget what the
Yeah.
number, fourfold or something,
Right.
Jerry probably. tell
Yeah,
me.
so-
And we can't hire summer cops.
All in
anymore.
Massachusetts, some
Yeah.
cops. I'm sorry, Paul,
Right.
go ahead.
No, so where I would come out, when in doubt, tell the truth, that we go with the 300,000 override and also explain what we're hoping to do is move some money around during the year to get the additional 2 cops that we think we need.
Yeah.
So
And I think that's
I would just be totally transparent.
The other thing, and Jerry, I'm interested in your input on this, is I really think there is a hypersensitivity to the STR. There's been a lot of discussion about STR, not just, the taxes, but the fees lately. And people are still smarting from water in the town, and they knew that, it was put out there that the STR was going to be used to pay for wastewater debt, so we're trying to avoid the problem we had in there. I think that's a real
Concern.
topic we have to address when we come up with a final solution here with Rich. But Jerry, what's your thought? I'm sure nobody's talked to you about STR in the last couple of years.
Yeah,
But go ahead.
none whatsoever. From the select board point of view, from what I gather in dealing with them, the STR being used for wastewater is very, very, very important. And one of the things we wanted to try and avoid, really try and avoid, was to use STR for operating purposes. We didn't want to depend on it for that. I mean, STR has been greater than we anticipated. I think from the select board standpoint, it's been pretty steady, but we can have years when it slips, and if we're depending on operating, they're worried about it. So that, in answer to you, Tom, that's my thing, that the select board would much rather not use STR for operating. Now, we're not going to let the town sink. So if we have to, you have to do those things, but they really don't want to. The other thing I wanted to raise with what Paul had said, and I don't know the full answer to this, Rich, you might, with an override, we have to have a ballot within probably 2 weeks of the town meeting, or if it's in the rain date, it's within three days of the town meeting.
Town meeting.
And so I think the ballot's going to show 600. If we go 600,000 and cut it down, it's going to cause confusion on the ballot question.
Yeah, you're right about that. Yeah, the ballot would have to be.
Would already be printed. So the select board, since this would be a select board motion on the warrant, when whoever it is making that motion, we would explain that the request was 600. We put it at 300 so that we can get these 2 officers. We haven't started, and then we will see during the year if we can find efficiencies somewhere to be able to hire the other 2 and be transparent in the explanation to the motion. But if you want to go with 325 or 300, whatever, because it was 650, maybe it's 325. You put the 325 in, the ballot for the election shows 325, and we have the explanation at town meeting that it went from, we took that from 650 down to 325 and kind of explain it so that the town, so the citizens understand it who are at town meeting. And I can't remember, we might even try and put that in an explanation.
Yeah, I'd write it up as part of our article summary.
In
All
the summary? In
And
the
we also
summary.
have a pre-town meeting. That's an opportunity to explain it.
Right.
And, given the significance of this, I would have to, I have to figure out the timing and availability and all that, but I'd have to, I feel like I obligated at any rate to open myself out and post it out on the town website or Facebook or whatever it is, and give people the opportunity to come in and talk to me about it. And I can explain the proposal and how this all works, one-on-one with people, or even have a separate session where people can come in to hear about it outside of town, so they can learn about it before town meeting, give them a little education.
Rich, back to the bigger chunk of an override, the schools. Do you know if the other three towns are like, I mean, they've obviously getting hit by the same issues. I don't know what their enrollment
Nope.
numbers have changed, but are they all going to be looking for overrides for the same reason
Not
we
sure
are?
about Orleans.
Brewster has already noted that
Brewster
they're
will be
planning on
okay.
override.
Wellfleet, I know because I'm helping them, is going to be okay. They were a beneficiary of, so I don't know this for sure, and like I said, I don't know Orleans, but Wellfleet's a beneficiary of a decrease of about 200, I think, and what was ours, 450? So perhaps Brewster got the beneficiary of the other 250, and I don't know where Orleans is in that, but it comes from one and goes to another, right? So
If we went up, somebody.
Yeah,
went down.
somebody else went down, yeah.
so Wellfleet made out, they had to actually have a decrease in their Nauset school budget because of they are a less participant.
Wellfleet made out, Brewster made out.
At the moment, as far as I know, Brewster will not need an over.
Brewster
Will
doesn't
not
need
be.
no right
And the
out
other-
of schools anyway.
And the other thing, you gotta take Wellfleet with a little bit of grain of salt, because in the last 3 years, well, it's even just the last 2 years, I think they have like $3 million of override.
Yeah,
So,
They haven't even had their,
and I'm not sure
Yeah.
they really knew how much they needed in those last
Certified.
couple of years. They might have had more than they needed. So that might be another reason why they're doing okay, because they've had a couple that may or may not have been necessary, but.
But these other towns' participation came down, but the school budget, they weren't predicting the school budget to go up this much.
Yeah, that's why I was thinking, even though their, percentage might have increased or decreased, the costs never go down, the bottom.
No,
line
I think in the
what
case of
things cost.
Wellfleet, their actual budget did go down.
Yeah.
The
Wow.
amount of the shift resulted in a decrease more than the extent of the budget increase.
Yeah, well,
And you're pretty sure Brewster isn't gonna need an override?
Yeah, we already talked to Peter.
yeah.
I have a few questions. I'm gonna go backwards up your sheet here, the explanations. So I'm like, I noticed in the draft, the latest draft warrant, that the capital budget went up by about $600,000.
Yeah.
So is that, is that in these numbers, or
No.
where's that gonna come from?
Well, I wasn't,
Free cash,
I can easily talk about it, but it wasn't, it's gonna be for the budget hearing, but since you mentioned it. Actually, I was gonna mention it under staff updates. Yes, there's been some big changes to the capital budget. And this is attributed to all of the question you just asked. Town hall with this project and other work, HVAC and other work, I needed to increase the town hall facility capital budget, repair and maintenance budget. Jackie has learned that there needs to be work done on Town Center Plaza
That's the 320.
on the roof. So that was a big add to that line that existed. And then there's a couple of small things, and I just learned this morning when I was talking to Adam, there'll be one more smaller change for about, I think, 15 grand. All that is funded from our existing free cash.
Free cash.
So no impact on tax levy or anything like that.
But, so there was a line in here about the free cash that the bonding was like just the returns of 5%.
That's a reference to, that, is that on the write-up in the back of the sheet?
Yeah, the back,
Yeah.
I'm working on my way.
That
up
has
that.
to do with the, that doesn't have to do with how much free cash we have. It has to
Okay.
do with returns, budgetary savings on expenditure budgets. So they like to see on your 40 million budget that you only spent 38 million. Because 2 million unspent would be 5% savings on
So
it.
that's what they're looking at, is the return, not the balance. But if we're squeezing the free cash to get this extra capital, is it going to affect being able to find that extra money for the policemen?
No, because that free cash already exists and was earned in past years.
Next year's free cash.
And so,
And so I understand that the two officers a little bit better, or the, or this, the option to get two more. Could you, depending on where you, what you can find along the way, get enough for one? Possibly, and get one the year after, or?
we'll have to see how it
or-
goes,
or-
but
or
you know, there's,
sequester that money for FY 25 and then get the two in FY 26? Is that?
well, sequestering it and having it doesn't do you much because it's a one-time thing, right? So it needs to be recurring, right? But here, you know, so here's some of the calculation, and I don't want to get into the sausage making too much, but you know, why is so Jerry, you mentioned, you know, 325. It's not 325. It's we're asking for 300 from 650 because part of that is my contemplation and calculation that we can do better in our benefits area. And I already started this last year and I think we got 10 people signed up and since we got that base, we're going to build on that base this year. And we've already started this process to get some of our employees to, if, you know, only if it's beneficial to them. I don't want to put anybody in a bad health insurance plan that doesn't work for them. But if it works for them, we have new alternatives that they didn't have before. Well, we've always had, but they haven't been offered. And now I'm offering them. And that's called a high deductible health plan with a health savings account, which under the right circumstances can be very beneficial to an employee. In addition to being beneficial, it will save them 25 to 30% on their premium, and it'll also save the town the same 25 to 30%. But we got to pay a little bit into the health plan so we don't get full savings. But my point is there's savings to be had within the health insurance budget. So I'm banking on, you know, maybe these officers, maybe some existing staff that we can get some more conversion. Maybe we can build on the 8 or 9 or 10 that we have and get, you know, 20, 25. And that's, you know, 10, 15, 20% savings each time you get someone converted over. And I can use that to pay for the benefits of the new staff. So I've pared down the 650 was the full boat cost to hire 4 officers. I'm banking on the fact that we can do better than 650 because of some of these changes. But that's why all this has to work out. That's why it takes time. And open enrollment comes in May. So come May or June, I'll find out the success on that and I can translate that into next year and possibly reallocate some of that money.
But before we go on, off of the police
Yeah, one more
officers,
No, go
are
ahead.
you all done with the police?
Here's
officers?
another question, I think.
The question I thought was going down along the lines is we go for an override for 2, you hire 2, you look in the budgets to find, see if you can find another 300. If you find 300, you hire 2 more next year. If I find 150, if you find 150, do you hire a third cop?
Oh, probably.
Okay, all right, so that's one scenario that, okay, we get part of the way there. And
And then
maybe
maybe
in
the
the
next
following year or the year after, we have the 4th one, depending upon how Adam sees them integrating into the force. Okay, I just want,
Yeah. No, it's not all or
Yeah.
nothing.
I didn't think it was. Okay, thank you.
The last question on this page is the about using the short-term rental receipts. This sentence that says, this is a one-time fix and allocation of local revenues to the operating budget would severely impact our wastewater funding plans.
Mhm.
So does that mean if we have to use the contingent budget and if we have to use the short-term rental receipts, we can't then go back to using the receipts for wastewater?
No.
You can't.
They'd be used. You can only use them once.
I mean,
He's talking about
the
the
next,
next year.
the following
The
year.
following year.
Oh, we could continue to use short-term rental receipts,
For.
but short-term, no,
No.
for the operating budget,
Because now you've integrated it into your
Yeah, right,
operating
right.
budget.
right? So it has to stay there.
You've committed it,
And-
you've
and
committed
part
it for
of,
next year and it's got to be there to be used the next year because you've still got to pay what you're paying next year for the following year.
And not to get too, again, fine detail, but you guys, I think, appreciate some fine details sometimes. There's a big difference between having the short-term rental receipts funding your budget and property taxes funding your budget. You know, we've spent a lot of time, you've heard me say that when we did collective bargaining, we gave a bit and gave some good increases, but what we got back in return was reduced step increases. So you're getting money, but the progression is slower, which is manageable for us. Right now, we're probably at about a 3.5% annual increase for wages instead of a 4.5%.
Yep, remember that. Yep.
And we get 2.5% a year and we get about a point of new growth. So 3.5% increases is manageable on the property tax. Now, that 3.5% increase increases property taxes, so I understand that. But are we going to get 3.5% increases in short-term rental receipts reliably year over year? And the answer is maybe. Maybe some years it'll go up, maybe some years will come down. But it's not a stable funding source. We'd much rather have it secured with the tax levy. And people voted for that. And as long as we make, I think the future for everybody around here is whenever we go forward for budgets, they all got to be level service budgets. The extras have to be extras and evaluated almost separately,
On the capital,
Rich?
the work in town hall, is it possible to turn that into a project and go to CPA or whatever?
The CPA is paying for the majority of the work that's been done. They've been to us twice. And we have,
3 times.
well, no, we got 300 left from the original request and our second request was for 680,000. And at the last.
Yeah, the extra money being asked for isn't for this current project. It's more for the HVAC mechanical stuff that has to happen.
So it wouldn't qualify under CPA then.
Yes,
Why not?
I
It's
don't
not
think-
historic.
yeah.
You've got, do you have HVAC in 580 Massasoit Road?
It's called a hearth.
No, you have an HVAC system in that money.
That's part of what needs to be done at the building in order for it to be used as
But
housing.
that's a housing appropriation.
We hope to have housing on the second and the third floors.
Okay, so you're not changing the heat system on the first floor.
Oh, I'm sure, yeah. That would be, whatever is going in would be for the building, not just for the second and the third floor.
Well, it says it's historic preservation.
Yeah, well, that's the entire project.
So does the money that's in here for historic preservation include an HVAC?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure exactly what you're,
Massasoit.
oh, yeah, I'm not sure what you're looking at and pointing to.
Well, it says it's a historic.
Yeah, oh, is this part of the warrant?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know what you were looking at.
CPA projects typically also are supposed to show funding sources other than just CPA. I mean, that's a strengthening it. So part of the town hall pieces, like the landscaping pieces of it that aren't really fit,
Historic preservation.
but also the towns, the budget for some of it is coming from other things. The town doesn't have the option of, well, I guess it does fundraising like nonprofits do, but the Chapel in the Pines, for example, raised a whole bunch of money. Schoolhouse Museum's going to be raising money. So
I'm just saying, is it possible?
is that
to
possible
Pay for the HVAC system
with CPA funds?
out of CPA funds, since
If-
a well operating HVAC system is needed.
Reserves.
I would say it would be okay for this building, but it's not for a building that wasn't historic.
Right,
The-
but it's that's right, the
Right,
three.
yeah, they-
Police and the fire aren't historic buildings.
Oh, no, I understand.
The extra
Yeah.
in the,
Is that what yeah, I forget where I put it.
you added 3.5.
Good question.
But no,
Yeah, well,
I'm
it-
not sure I heard the answer.
the answer, well, the thing with CPA is there's hardly ever clear answers. It's a lot of gray.
Well,
But-
operate in the gray.
But
If there's gray, the answer is yes.
it could, well, and a lot of it comes down to town council, what your town council says is eligible or not. And our town council historically has been very
Conservative.
liberal or whatever.
The opposite.
Yeah.
The summary says
That
mechanical.
hardly ever said no.
Yeah,
It's in there.
yeah. So, yeah. But I'm just saying,
For instance, the first time it came in for the 300, it was for a roof over the whole building.
that was
And
600,
I was on-
originally
I was on
600.
that committee then, and I said, wait a minute, the only historic part is the front part. But Jerry and others that were on the committee pointed out that, well, we have historic documents in here and we have these pictures on the wall and the roof is protecting those. So we said, well, let's send it to the town council for a decision, and they came back and said, yep, it's eligible. So I wouldn't be surprised if you could use CPA money for.
Well, and eligibility to apply is one thing. The
Committee's gotta-
stewards of the funds are actually the Volunteer Community Preservation Act Committee, not the town.
And
to make
town meeting,
the-
and
those
town meeting.
decisions.
Town meeting.
Sure.
So you'd have to,
Following the CPA recommendations, yeah.
administration would have to convince the committee that it
Right.
was a worthwhile.
Met the requirement.
Worthwhile project. Committee would have to vote for it, depending on what other projects they had competing for that money. Put it to town meeting and town meeting.
I gotta believe you
But-
could use the same argument you just made. If the
Yeah.
roof was protecting the stuff,
Yeah.
you know, like the
Yeah,
pictures on the
but-
wall,
but-
then the heating system is
Yeah.
maintaining the
And
temperature.
does-
unlike the short-term rental CPA funds, although not guaranteed what amounts are coming in each year, they are tied exactly to the tax,
Well, it's the
the
three,
real estate taxes. So they are more predictable, I
Predictable,
guess is the right
it's
word.
3%,
don't
the
spend it
surcharge
fast.
is 3%.
Except for the state part.
Yeah,
Yeah, the state
matching
matches
has
depends.
been decreasing over the last couple of years.
Anyway,
Yeah.
it's something to look at.
Yeah.
And I think the town has been looking at that, using CPA money for some of these projects, obviously. Massasoit
Can
Road.
we put some apartments upstairs?
I think Roy had a question.
Another question that, take me through the logic again of why under the contingent budget, the STR went to 1,000,004 from the million 160 and override proposal.
So under the override proposal, 815 and is for wastewater debt service.
Yeah.
And 345 is for town center plaza debt service. We have no other way to fund town center plaza, so that survives to the contingent proposal.
Hmm.
But the 815 doesn't, because it gets added to the tax levy because it can,
Right.
and then you repurpose 1,055,000 to the operating budget for a total of $1.4 million use of short STR.
Why wouldn't you, if you're gonna use 1,000,004 in a contingent, why wouldn't you use 1,000,004 in the override proposal and reduce the override to 960,000?
Because then we'd be using 240,000 STR money to fund the operating budget.
Yep.
And again, following the select board's policy is they don't want to do that. They want us to preserve it for wastewater.
As much of it as you can.
If that's their policy, why are they spending it under the override contingents budget?
Because taking $1 million, $1.2 million of reduction on the municipal side of the budget would be devastating for the
Devastating.
services. They could tell us that's what they want to do.
I understand.
But,
I'm just saying.
I'm anticipating they don't want us to do that.
I'm just saying. If we could take 240, use the same assumption but take 240, reduce the override. Which would have a real impact. On reducing the tax. The total tax. Levy plus the other stuff.
No, I hear you,
We
and
do.
I understand that perspective. I guess my perspective and this is why we flesh all this out, to have this discussion. And maybe the select board will say this at the budget hearing, but
They won't. They won't.
I try to,
Just like when we had the favorable surprise in the school budget a couple of years ago, when we were gonna do a override. Rather than get rid of the override, we increase the budget.
so our recommendation isn't to use the short-term rental for operating.
Yep.
That's A. B, What was the B? Another piece to that. I forgot. Lost my train of thought.
Well,
B, and you, or any of you can disagree with me, because I'm sure some do and some don't, but in my opinion, this is the schools are causing this, and I think the schools need to
Tear down.
account for it and self, if I had my way, we wouldn't even be in this situation. It really bothers me. It's bothered me for 30 years in this business. That because the schools have a problem, it becomes the town's problem.
Mhm.
Because we're forced to pay that assessment. And if we're forced to pay that assessment and we can't fund it, we're forced to cut our budget. And that's a terrible way to pit each other again. And we're always the loser.
Mhm.
And so we gave them the 31 grand that we could accommodate to get the nice even 1.2. It's the school's problem. I think the school should present why they think they need it.
is it,
And as I indicated here,
Mhm.
it's really only 191,000 extra that came up with the rest of it. It's kind of our problem. We had enrollment shift. The town of Eastham owns that.
Mhm.
is it state law that the school budget has to be part of the town's operating budget? I mean,
It is regardless of how you parse it. We put it all together in one. Some towns take town stuff as a separate article and school stuff as a separate article. But at the end of the day, it all adds up in the same pot. So
because you're still on the hook if it gets
Yeah.
voted down. Yeah.
So where I'm coming from is if you go ahead this way, even though I think you could have reduced the override, what has traditionally happened, once the override happens, it's old news.
Mm.
It gets spent every year.
Right.
If the school number comes down, we'll go spend it on something else. That's,
I don't think that's true. And, our example of that is what we've been doing with the STR for a number of years now, where we're not budgeting it, or to the extent it has been budgeted based on the select board desire. Any savings has been stewarded and set aside and not spent and been transferred to a special need. It was first to fund state reserves to a certain level, second to stabilize the capital plan. And when those things are accomplished, by and large, was then to dedicate it all to wastewater. And we've done those things and stewarded that money and not spent it on other things. And what I'm telling you here is part of this proposal. I might not recommend that you get the money back, but if we went back to 18% again next year and we had a, whatever the, $400,000 reduction, we could give the money back or not raise it, I should say, or we could keep raising it. If we did that, in my mind, and my goal, and I know Jackie's goal would be, if that were raised at all, it would be put aside in a stabilization fund to mitigate these types of circumstances in the future. I would not repurpose it. Hey, we only got one extra police officer. Now we're going to get the other one because the schools went down. That's not what we're going to do.
And that's why you have to stay on the finance committee, so that if the education budget ever goes down, which it won't, you can make that point.
our percentage.
A percentage.
No, matter of fact, and it's a valid point, and you just actually triggered a thought in my mind, Rick. Because of that, when we do our financial policies over the summer, this committee ought to recommend as an addition to the financial policies that we go to the select board, that we put that in there, just like we put in there the whole thing about the STR for wastewater.
Mhm, mhm. So I have another question on the,
Mary, I'm sorry, Rory's been waiting.
oh,
Oh, yeah, Royce had his hand up.
oh.
Yeah,
Roy?
just
I
a question,
didn't see his
just
hand.
looking down the road 2 or 3 years. What we're working on now is a budget for 24, 25, and we're talking about an override of 1.5 million. Um,
6.
when is the next negotiation? Is it 26, 27? Is that when we would do the next negotiations?
You're talking about collective bargaining?
Collective bargaining,
No, I know.
yes.
So every year, as you know, Rory, we do financial projections.
Right,
And when I did the financial projections and we asked for an override last time because of collective bargaining, I
Right.
married the two to make sure that what we asked for was gonna provide us for the 3 years of that contract. And with the proposed budget with the 1.2 override, schools being equal next year, I
Mhm.
think we can still accomplish that on the town side. So, all things being equal, I think next year we would still be on target for not needing an override. It's the following year.
Right.
So this is 25.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm telling you that hopefully 26, we could stay on target with our projection and not need the override. And it would be 27 where we need potentially additional money to settle contracts.
That's
How
what I
about the
thought.
elephant?
Okay.
How about the elephant in the room, the when's wastewater gonna hit?
Um,
Hmm.
we talked about that
Yeah.
yesterday. And the engineers and consultants were saying, next town meeting.
Yeah.
And I think based on the discussion, I think you intuitively know that's not happening. So that's probably a 27 discussion too.
So it's back in 27 wastewater.
Yeah.
Rich, is the CBA for the teachers going on right now?
Yes.
Yes,
It is. So
that's my question.
so won't that hit next year?
It was in their budgets. They've provided
Oh, it's
carrying
in there.
amounts for
Oh, that's
settlement.
right. That's right. Yeah. There's just like you did, there's a block.
Reserve. But that's my question. Is there any chance that those monies that are being saved for the collective bargaining that hasn't all been completed might not be enough?
Could be.
And that affects the bottom line again.
I would doubt it. Quite actually, probably the opposite. And so that's, again, we're getting to the sausage making, but that is on my mind. When I hear those contracts are settled, I'll be calling the business office, wanting to know the details of that and how much, what's the value of that versus what you carried. Because if there's savings there,
Right.
And
don't fake that into next year's budget.
Right.
Did you plan something comparable to what you did in the previous CBA agreements as a percentage? In that, what they've reserved, is that a comparable percentage to what we saw with the police, firefighters, et cetera?
I'm not sure. I
Sure.
don't get involved with the teachers unions.
Yeah, I'm just
they
trying
came
to
up with that,
manage
yeah.
expectations. They do that independently.
That might be a good regional agreement vision, right? Participation with the communities in collective bargaining.
Yeah, you can't have them out there with a,
I think there is.
7%.
I think Peter Lombardi and Brewster is a representative on that bargaining. So I think
that's right. He was.
if not being in the agreement doesn't mean that we can't do it, but.
Mhm.
So I think we actually do that.
So I have another question. The original tax rate, if I remember correctly from a while back, was $7.33 before all of this occurred. So we're now up to either 765 or 757, depending upon how things go.
Yeah.
Versus the 730, if I remember correctly, it was 733. We're now at 701. So we're going from 701 to 760, depending upon the decision,
I
765.
never really go by the tax rate because it's subject to changes in values.
Well, I know the
But it's
assessed
more-
values.
It's more on the dollar value of expected increases that I try to look at. And I don't have it in front of me, but if any of you have the budget book, I think I probably put in the presentation based on that initial balance budget, what the expected increase was dollar wise.
What the assessed value will be increasing to. Yeah.
Should be, Tom, is that the presentation's probably right in front.
Well, this
Year end?
time is.
So this one?
Yeah.
Yeah, Rich.
We have it here.
Bottom line is what median tax burden going up $700. 771. Actually,
15, almost 16%.
No.
Yeah, Mary, you're right. It was 733 was the rate and anticipated median increase of 532. So with these proposals, it's going from 532 to either 727 or 771.
Yep.
Mary's Jerry, assuming the 733 and the 771, the two numbers that you said, are based on the same assessment value, the jump is about a little over 5%.
It is based on the same assessment value, yeah.
When you said 777, I'm not sure where you're getting the 771. That's a dollar increase. I think you're comparing percentages to dollars.
Yeah, we're.
Oh, okay, tell me what the the tax rate was 7.3.
Right now, our tax rate is 701.
That tax rate is on an old assessment. The 733
Correct.
proposal
730
is on the new assessments, and it
the
goes from
newest.
733 to what number, Mary?
So from 733 to, depending upon which way we go, either 765.
Okay,
So it's-
765, okay. Divided
From
by
730.
733, that's a 4.3% increase. Because those are based on the same assessment. So the overrides add 4.3%.
So we're talking about going from 701 currently to 765.
But 701 doesn't, you can't compare 701 and 765 because 701 is based on a lower assessment value.
I agree.
Our assessments have gone up.
So the percentage impact on the taxpayer is even higher than the percentage increase of 765 versus 701.
No,
Right, that's,
Yes.
it's 15.6%, right? It's in that first column. The percent increase from the prior year of your taxes.
Right.
The tax rate is just it's a result of a calculation, really doesn't mean anything on its own.
Right, so it's the 532 jumping to 771. That's a 15.6 increase.
Right.
In, yeah, the taxes.
Plus a 3% surcharge.
Immediate.
That's always been.
Tom, can you hand me your book again? I'm sorry.
Yep.
It's all in this book.
Yeah, because the percentage increase 765 versus 701 is 9%. The rest of that increase is assessment.
Yeah. Looked back a few years on the school budgets, because Mary challenged me on about what that they had been kind of coming in under the 3% for several years. So FY24, the education budget was actually up, the total budget was up 13%, but that was because that was the first year we started adding the debt, the high school debt. The education services without the debt service for FY24 was increased 4.8%. In FY22, what happened at 23? What happened at 23? But FY22 was a 1.53 education increase. And FY21, it was actually a 0.31 decrease.
Interesting.
And then in FY20, which was what that was before COVID. So that was the real, that FY 21 was a COVID budget. It was up 3.49. So I guess my point is the schools sort of have been towing the line. And I think they couldn't do it anymore, just like when we have to go for an override. They got hit with the same inflation that's everybody's been hit with, and it's showing up this year.
I've got some numbers if everybody wants to write them down on this tax rate burden question. It's at least how I look at it. Give me one more second. So the first number, if you were to write down, would be the 2024 median tax burden is 4,941.
You said 5,940?
4,941. The 25 budget as originally proposed, which didn't include any override, would have been a tax burden of the median valued property with all the valuation changes and everything, estimated valuation changes, 5,473, which is a $532 increase.
Right.
If the school override passes only, the tax burden would become 5,668, which is a $727 increase from 24.
Right.
A $195 increase over the base budget for 25.
Right.
If you then also pass the police $300,000 override, tax burden becomes 5,712, which is a $771 increase from 24, and an additional $44 over the budget with school override. And I didn't get the percentages yet, but you can. But that's the order of magnitude, the progression.
Yeah, with the police and schools, it's a 15.6% increase. It's 14%, 14.3 if or something like that without the police.
Yeah. Any other questions, comments, etc.? Well, we can all go home and have a drink.
It won't be that
Safe.
Fun. No dancing on the tables, Mary.
No, Dan, not today, not tonight, Jerry,
Not tonight, no.
not tonight. Okay. Shucks. Oh,
So
okay.
you did mention on the one sheet that the special ed is a big driver of
Yep.
the school budgets and the.
Right, so,
Yeah.
just not to belabor the point, but the 1.2 million.
Yeah.
Almost 600,000 because of shift, 400,000 because of sped,
Right.
and that 51,000 oddball,
Right.
thing, hopefully we can solve. I mean, that's it,
So half of it was sped.
40%,
At one point, and I know we've talked about how we get repaid or receive monies for special ed costs after the fact, so to speak, of putting together some sort of, if you want to call it a stabilization fund or some sort of fund that, because this isn't going to be the only year that we have special ed costs. If we have them this year, the students are going to continue in the grades and the costs are going to be there still. So,
Right, but once they get to the district, they become the district, it
Mm-hmm.
gets a portion of it, so
Mhm.
it diffuses it. The problem with the 400,000 is it's at the elementary school level. So the 400,000 is
All on East Hampton.
all on Eastham
Mhm, mhm.
above
at the
last year,
elementary
which
school.
last year was already high. This is higher again.
Oh, I know, I know.
And one of the pieces of due diligence I did is this just a this year issue? And unfortunately, the answer is no. This is at least a 2-year issue.
Mhm.
And in that 2 years, let's say you make it through that, something else can occur.
Mhm, mhm.
Is it a structural change or is it the pure randomness of?
Special ed is the pure randomness of
Mm.
kids. They show up, you own them 100% if they need to be an outplacement and you gotta pay
It's not
that
a
tuition.
different kind of program or
I think so. I think it's
just the
just,
same programs.
yeah,
just the
depends
random
on what
up
they
and down.
need. Yeah, their needs are.
They need to be outplaced to a specialized school in Sandwich.
Yep, no, understood.
That's where you pay the tuition and you gotta pay them to transport them there.
Mhm. One of the problems is, and I think it might have happened here, is that you start the school year without needing some of those monies because you don't have those students, and then November comes and they show up.
And actually, that did happen this year, and so I am anticipating that might be a year-end transfer that we need to make, because we'll have special ed costs for this year that weren't budgeted.
Mhm.
I mean, in case anybody didn't see it, the elementary school budget increase excluding sped was 91,000. And
Including.
the sped was 398,000, almost 300.
Huge. It's almost four times.
Yeah. What's this mean, Reed? Whatever your name is, Rich. And this sheet, operating budget proposed over under amount provided.
So we provided like 3%,
You mean in the
and so the
draft
extent,
budget
yeah, so to
Okay.
the extent it came over the.
from the draft, budget, right? The first draft.
Hey, Rich, I got a question for you relative to charter school. Is there a scenario where a town could say, I'm not gonna accept charter school kids and then
choice or
choice, I'm sorry.
Choice.
I'm sorry, not charter, you're right, school choice. Is there a scenario where a town could say,
or district?
I'm not gonna accept kids, but yet still allow their kids, still enable their kids to go to other schools? And in other words, if you accept, you have to, if you send kids.
Can't
you have
limit
to
them
receive.
leaving.
You can't,
You can,
But you can limit.
you can limit them coming.
you can.
You can not allow it at all. You can allow it. Usually there's an amount, we'll allow up to 200 and there's a process to,
Okay. Okay, but so you
but you
can
can't
say,
let anybody go. And matter of fact, that's part of, I think maybe, and again, this is a good question for the schools. I'll write this down maybe and see if they can ask that, but with the construction in a brand new tech school
Mhm.
and a brand new Monomoy, my sense is, and this is just, not data behind it, just my sense of it is anecdotal. We have kids leaving on school choice and going to Monomoy and Tech.
Yeah, our numbers are down, I think, on school choice this
Hey,
year.
Monomoy would be choice, Tech would just be, they're just going to Tech, but.
yeah,
Tech isn't a choice.
right.
What, Tom, this is Jerry. You can, Nauset regional schools can say we will not accept choice students, pull any more in, but we cannot stop students from wanting to go to Monomoy or wanting to go to Sturgis or so forth, and Nauset region will have to cover those costs. So you can stop them from coming in, but you can't stop them from going out.
I'm leaving. Yeah, right.
Okay, no, that's very helpful. And part of this, Jerry, actually goes back to your question about the middle school and whether there'd be room to put kids up there and how we'd find the room if we had to take a lot of this is a discussion some of us would
Yeah,
have on the sides.
It's all, I just want the numbers to have the discussion before
Yeah.
school year 25-26. We've got to make a reasoned decision. All 4 towns do, not the school committee. All 4 towns have to make a reasoned decision on it.
Okay, thank you.
Do you know, Jerry or Rich, is there any commitment to the school choice kids that are already started in the school? Can you just kick them all out in 1 year, or do you have to let them keep coming?
No, you can kick them out whenever you
Okay,
want. You
okay.
can just say we're done. But I think that being said, I think they probably are committed to seeing them through.
The 4 year, in high school for 4 years.
But there's nothing, that's just a matter of
Not in writing, yeah, okay.
you know,
Pretty extreme.
practice or.
Well, Jerry.
Tom, there was.
It-
There was a lot
But,
of debate. when we
Peter,
were
for
back
me, it's
talking
a-
about
it-
The bill.
For me, Peter, it's a matter of being able to go to sleep
yes.
at night. I mean, if you have a child starting as a freshman in Nauset region and then you kick them out, I would not feel comfortable with that. Which is why I am pushing so hard to have this discussion before the 25-26 school year, because once you go school choice route, it really limits the ability, morally for me, limits the ability to try and move students from the middle school to the high school if you have to kick people out for room. I just want a discussion. I don't know how it will go. That's all I'm looking for.
Hold on to those trailers.
Boy.
Anybody else? Okay. I don't know if I should thank you or not.
That was good. It was a good summary. Rich. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, we appreciate the input, the information. I'm going to go back to the agenda. And I'm going to look at item number 2 is the review and vote on the minutes of the prior meeting. And let's see, I'm looking to see. Everybody was here. So nobody abstains. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of February 28th, 2024?
I make a motion to approve the minutes of 2024.
It's Tom. Do I have a second?
Second,
Roy, I'll take Roy.
Sure.
Is there any discussion on the minutes of February 28th? All in favor? 1,
Aye.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 9, 0. Okay, thank you, Mayor. I'm on now to new business. And I know Jackie did not print a written report for the select board on Monday. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm talking about new business. I have no new business. Does anybody have any new business? I'm sorry about that. Town manager's report is next. As I said, none was printed. I guess one of my questions, and you said something you had wanted to mention, Rich, but the location of the town meeting, originally we were told, and it was being discussed to have it on May 6th. That's been changed, and it's now looking like it will be either, May 6th was a Monday at the middle school down in Orleans. We're now talking about May 4th, which is a Saturday, or May 18th, which is a Saturday, at the high school in the field there. And I guess they're looking at all the pieces that they need to proceed, tents and everything else like that. So I guess that's going to be decided on shortly, right? For the
next select board
at the next select board meeting, yeah.
Is that because the middle school's not, Orleans is not an option?
Yeah, and it's a 1-year thing, and if you having these big questions with some participation, you might have to have multiple rooms, and we've never set up in there.
Okay.
And we know the high school field works well, so it's
Right.
just a concern of, we get the
A
weather.
late snowstorm. So far, it's been good luck out there.
Yeah. There was also the additional cost of having it in Orleans, using their police and all of that, that would be needed. Did you have something else that under town manager report?
No.
Oh, okay.
See.
Before I adjourn, I just want to make sure that everybody knows exactly what our meeting schedule is. I know we talked about it before, but I just want to go over it. Next Wednesday is March 20th, and we're scheduled for 4:30. It's, we have, that's my question, 4:30
Oh, it is 4:30.
and 4:30.
At the library,
Oh, we're at the library?
yes.
Mhm.
Oh, I know we did that last year, but I didn't know that. So March 20th, if the school budgets, it's with the select board and it's at the library. Okay,
And Mary, Cape Cod Tech would like to present first, and they'll be remote.
yeah, they were remote last year.
And then Bill Crosby, the elementary school and central office rep, I think it'll be the superintendent and business manager will also be there
Okay, and is
in
Bill,
person.
is Bill coming? Because last year he didn't come.
As I understand it, he's coming. So we got
Okay,
the school
good.
principal and the business manager and the superintendent.
Okay, so first tech, then elementary, and then region. So again, March 20th, next Wednesday at 4:30 at the library for the discussion on the schools. And then on March 25th, which is a Monday, that's going to be a joint meeting with, and that's at 4:30 too. Oh, the 4:30 is just the regular meeting, and then at 5:30 is the public hearing on the warrant.
The budget,
Yeah, yeah,
Just the budget.
budget
or the
hearing, yeah.
Budget hearing, not the.
yeah, yeah.
It's March 27th.
Mary?
That's,
Monday.
yeah, yes, Jerry.
The 4:30, there's we have to have a hearing on a vicious dog complaint.
Oh, I
So
read
that's
something
part-
about that.
Yeah, so that's what that is. Then we're gonna go to the public hearing at 5:30. It may start off as the select board meeting, but then immediately go to the public hearing.
Mhm. Okay, thanks, Jerry. So again, on the 25th, it's our part of the, everybody can obviously attend the regular select board meetings, but the public hearing is starting at 5:30 on Monday, March 25th. So
So
does
Mary, I
every,
guess I did have something to add.
I'm sorry?
I guess I did have something to add. So all that, what you just said, it obviously is correct. But now you have a draft of the warrant, which still needs some work.
Mhm.
But there's some things in there that you might not have contemplated yet. And so at your discretion, perhaps if you want to have other meetings, but you have some zoning
Yeah,
articles and bylaw articles you might not have heard about yet, which is why we got you the zoning task force report, which is the background of that. And I don't know if you've heard from Laura Kelly about the pesticide ban, or if you want to,
Mhm,
you could
yeah.
watch her presentation to the select board. And
that's going to be regular warrant article.
yeah.
It's not an individual petition.
No.
Okay.
And I think that's it. You've heard on the CPA articles.
Mhm.
Budget hearing covers the budget articles. So I think that's it. Zoning and bylaw stuff. And then you need your votes.
We
I'm
got-
sorry?
And then you need your votes.
Yes, yes. So I'm just looking at the schedule. So we've just talked about the 20th, and we've just talked about the 25th. And the next normally scheduled meeting for the finance committee would be that same week was the 27th.
Right,
Right.
and since
should-
you've got that schedule up, Mary, can you refresh my memory? When did I put down that the warrant had to be to the printer?
Let me see. I'm looking to
April
see.
5th?
Warrant goes to printer April 5th.
That's
Right,
late.
so you have, 25th of the budget hearing, so you got any day that week or any day the following week before Friday.
Let's just keep meeting on Wednesdays.
So we have the Wednesday after the 25th meeting,
7th.
or we have, which would be the 27th, or we have the next Wednesday, which would be April 3rd. What are people's thoughts?
I like the 27th because I'll be traveling.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think we ought to do the 27th in case we need something
in case we need some additional
Or
time.
for something else.
Yeah, I think.
So I'll see,
We need to make sure we have
Paul.
the room.
So March 27th?
Yep, March 27th
I
would
already
be,
talked to Paul and he'll be able to do the zoning and, I'll see if he wants to bring in Mary.
Mary Need.
Yeah. But so they'll do I think he can do all the zoning and the bylaw stuff.
So we're talking about, on the 27th, we would be doing the, zoning and the pesticide.
Zoning,
Do you want, Laura
Ke-
Kelly here?
Laura Kelly. I think it's a good idea to
I'll
have
let her know, see if she can make it.
Yeah.
I'll also let her know to keep it to 10 minutes.
Yeah, yeah. So on the
Um,
27th, we'll be doing essentially the warrant.
And we can also do any final wrap up from the feedback from the budget hearing or
Mhm.
whatever. So I'll have and
That's
so
okay.
you could start that night if you want, or you could do the next week, your votes.
yeah, I don't think we're gonna be able to do everything on the 27th. All the votes and the zoning stuff.
Don't forget to do the zoning.
So
We
are
could
we
start
talking about the
voting.
27th being the pesticides and the zoning?
Yes.
And then on April 3rd, doing the warrant?
We should do all the votes
We-
at one
we
time
can-
if we can.
Really?
Well,
Again, I won't be here.
oh, you're not gonna be there.
So I'll have a slightly different.
We could. You know, it just depends on the time.
You can send in your mail-in ballot, Rick.
I have no idea how long the zoning thing will take, but I imagine, I mean, it's quite a bit to it.
So
so
it doesn't have to take long, but I think some of you might have some questions.
Exactly. There might be. There might be
I think
It's up to you guys.
That's
a
right.
question or two.
If we don't have any questions, we'll be able to get through it very quickly.
And then depending on the time, we can start to vote, at least like we've done before, just pick the easy ones.
Yeah,
pick
and then
some of
do,
them off.
and then do the
If there's
more,
something we don't have, we can put it
Yeah,
off to
yeah.
the following week, or we
Okay.
don't have the energy to debate. We have the 3rd as a backup. It's the 3rd, right?
Yep. Okay, so I just want to go over it. So we've talked about the 20th, we've talked about the 25th. We're now on the 27th is going to be the pesticides and the zoning and any warrant articles that can be done relatively quickly, perhaps. And then on April 3rd, the following week,
Finish up.
we'll finish up with the warrant.
Does the letter have to be in by April 5th when it goes to the printer? Probably.
Oh, that's right.
Right? Yeah, I forgot
Yeah.
the letter.
Yeah,
You guys start
Oh,
working?
dust off your draft. from last
Are you
year.
gonna do that again?
I will turn it around in whatever time frame I have to turn it around.
I think
You heard it. He's in.
Like, do I have a choice? Wait, if I have a choice, we can talk.
No, no, you don't have a choice.
turn up the speaker. You gotta do it.
did you say you had something else to do right now?
My
It's
day job,
unanimous.
but other than that.
So we're talking about the warrant going to the printer on April 5th. And so if we could have a letter by March 27th, and then if we had any changes, make that be approved by April 3rd, then we would have it ready for the printer for April 5th. Does that make sense for everybody? That gives you,
It's gonna be tough for Paul to do the letter when we haven't had votes.
Well, I can leave blanks. I mean, I'm not sure we're gonna have final numbers either, right? I can leave blanks and, you know.
Fill them in quickly afterwards.
Yep.
And Paul, there's probably, some moving parts to that letter. So to extent, feel free to call me, email me, and I can help you too.
Believe me, I will take you up on that.
and we talked about putting something in the letter regarding grants. I can't
Right.
remember if you were
Yeah.
at that meeting, but talking about grant
yeah,
monies.
Jackie, 3.8 million sticks in my mind for some
Yeah,
reason.
yeah, right, yeah.
Jackie was going to give me some number, and I think it'd be, given if we're talking 15.6% tax increases, it'd be a good thing to include.
Okay, are there any questions regarding the not the process, but the schedule that we've just been going through?
I just want to make sure of times.
Sure,
Okay, the one on the 25th is 5:30.
that's correct.
Okay.
Here at Town Hall.
Correct.
3:20 is at 4:30 at the library, 3:25 is at 5:30 at town hall. 3:27 is here at town hall. At would be our normal time, which would be at 4. For April 3rd is the warrant, that's here, that's at 4. And the warrant goes to the printer, that's just info, that's not us. Okay. So we need to ask Mary Nee for the March 27th date, and we need to ask Laura Kelly on the pesticides for March 27th.
The override items will be, there are also articles in the warrant, right?
No,
No.
it'll be,
Oh, that's right. 'cause
the
one
budget
thing-
will present it as Article 2A. And in the motion, it will say to raise and appropriate the 44 million, subject contingent upon the passage of an override, or otherwise 44 million plus 145. The police, yes, will be,
Separate.
2B will be the enterprise fund, 2C will be the police. There's a separate 300,000 contingent on an override.
Now, when you go to the ballot box, the 18th, I think, is the date of the voting. How will that be noted?
Be
in the
two separate questions.
separate
One will be a raise 1.2 million in excess of the levy limit for the
Uh-huh.
funding of schools, and the second one will be to raise
for
the additional tax levy 300,000
for the
for
police.
hiring of
Yeah.
new police
Yeah,
officers.
okay. Ballot.
So at some point, we're gonna we'll vote on the budget article. But a big part of that is this override, and that's gonna have, I would assume, be a major part of the letter.
Of Paul's
So
letter.
we've gotta help him
Mhm.
understand our recommendation, whatever it's gonna be.
Well, maybe we can come to the 27th, you know what I mean, with Paul, maybe you could come up with like what you believe to be here's the outline of the letter, the general consensus of the items that we have consensus on. And then we can work with Paul right after the 27th to get something, maybe with the approval of the rest of this committee, even if we have to approve it out of cycle, you know what I mean, before the meeting, so then they have it. We ought to be able to do it between the 27th, 3rd, so that we can get it in.
And that's why I suggest, maybe Paul and I will talk, because I just knowing how these things go, I would imagine, whether you've got one, 0 person or 1 person or 4, so against, let's say,
Yeah.
the override. Regardless, that begs the question, right? So you almost have to address the opposite opinion within the letter, I would imagine, right? So here's ultimately where we land as a committee,
Mhm.
but the, minority view of it is this.
Do we have to you have to put a minority opinion?
No, you don't, but I'm just saying in this circumstance of the magnitude of it
Yeah,
and
they
the
could
impact of it, you're gonna
give
want
a
to,
5-4
For the
vote in there,
override,
They're
they got it.
they're gonna wanna know what the thinking was, yeah.
Yeah.
And they should.
Okay. And anything else that needs to be clarified regarding our schedule and the letter, et cetera? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
That's Russ. Do I have a second?
Second.
That's Russ and that's Joanna. Do I have any discussion? All in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
1, 2, 3, 4, 9, 0, and it is 6:05, exactly.
Thanks for putting up with me, guys.
Thank you.